orthopedic surgeon and sports medicine physician, and today I am discussing whether Luke Rockhold should retire. Well, at least Dana White thinks he should.
He's been a great fighter. I'd like to see him hang it up.
For those of you who don't know, Luke Rockhold is a MMA fighter in the UFC. And this past weekend at UFC 239, Luke Rockhold fought Jan Blachowicz in his first light heavyweight bout in the UFC. Now, Luke Rockhold used to be a middleweight contender and UFC champion. After entering the UFC, Luke Rockhold became the middleweight champion after he defeated Chris Weidman in a bout in December of 2015. A rematch was scheduled between Luke Rockhold and Chris Weidman for the following year in May of 2016. However, Chris Weidman pulled out of the match with an undisclosed injury. Michael Bisping was called upon as a last-minute replacement for Chris Weidman, and he ended up knocking out Luke Rockhold in the fight. After a 15-month delay, Luke made it back to the ring against David Branch in September of 2016, and he won that match. He was later scheduled to fight Robert Whitaker for a potential middleweight title bout in February of 2018. However, at that time, Robert Whitaker was fighting a staph infection, and he pulled out of that match. Whitaker was replaced by Skyler Rockhold, who fought Rockhold and then defeated him by knockout. And I'm beginning to sense a theme here. Like, he has fought two replacement fighters twice and then been knocked out twice. Later that year, Rockhold was scheduled to fight Alexander Gustafsson in August of 2018. However, prior to that match, Rockhold pulled out with an undisclosed injury. The pending rematch with Chris Weidman was scheduled for November 2018. But again, Luke Rockhold pulled out with an undisclosed injury. And finally, Luke Rockhold fought in his first light heavyweight bout versus Jan Blachowicz in July of 2019. And unfortunately, he was knocked out. So why am I telling you all of this? Well, let me explain. So after UFC 239, Dana White said in a news interview, he thought Luke Rockhold should retire after having been knocked out by Jan Blachowicz.
He's been a great fighter. I'd like to see him hang it up.
Dana White cited the facts that Luke Rockhold had been, one, knocked out several times, and a few of those quite badly. Two, that he had broken his jaw for the second time. And lastly, three, that he had been dealing with recurrent staph infections for his left leg and also having had to undergo a skin graft procedure. Because of those facts, and also the fact that he's actually kind of successful as a model for Ralph Lauren, he said that perhaps he should consider hanging it up.
I'd like to see him hang it up.
You know, retiring from the fighting game, as it were. So I'm here to discuss that. And yeah, I guess the medical reasons why he should, or I guess should not, retire. So if we take the factors cited by Dana White in order, the first thing he said is that Luke Rockhold has been knocked out several times. And they've been pretty bad knockouts. The first time he was knocked out was when he was fighting Vitor Belfort. And he was knocked out by a spinning wheel kick to the side of his head. If you haven't already, you should watch my video on Shevchenko's knockout of Jessica I and my more recent video of Jorge Masvidal's knockout of Ben Askren's for more specifics on why getting knocked out is bad for you. So that was the first time he was knocked out. The second time he was knocked out was when Bisping was a replacement for Chris Weidman and he got knocked out in that match. The next time that he was knocked out was when he fought Yoel Romero. Again, one of the replacement fighters for the fighter he was scheduled to fight. And again, he was knocked out pretty badly. If you've ever watched Yoel Romero fight, you'll know that that brother is swinging a bag of hammers every time he throws a punch. And that bag of hammers is coming for your head. And finally, he was knocked out quite badly in his most recent fight in UFC 239. So if you're keeping count, that's 4 bad knockouts. And as I've said in my videos in the past, being struck on the head is kind of like taking a baseball bat to your computer. And yet, the computer comes back on and continues working. If your brain is a computer, getting knocked out is like smashing the computer with a baseball bat, and that's not good. And moreover, the effects of traumatic brain injuries or repeated concussions is cumulative over time. And this is the basis of the problem, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, the effects of which you don't see until many, many years later. So that's reason number 1, why he might want to consider retiring or hanging it up. 4 bad knockouts and the cumulative effects of all those traumatic brain injuries.
I'd like to see him hang it up.
Reason number 2, Dana White also said that this was the second time that Luke Rockhold had broken his jaw quite badly. When I looked at the medical suspension list for UFC 239, It stated that Luke Rockhold was medically suspended until January of 2020 unless he had been given the clearance of an oral maxillofacial surgeon, and that he would likely require surgery to fix his jaw. Now, I tried looking for information on when he had broken his jaw before, and I couldn't really find it. But recall that I told you that he had been knocked out quite badly by Yoel Romero in the past. And once again, when that brother is swinging, he is swinging a full bag of hammers at your head. And although it was never confirmed, there was some speculation that the other jaw break that Luke Rockhold had suffered was from that knockout from Yoel Romero. And had Luke Rockhold suffered a broken jaw from his fight with Yoel Romero in February of 2018, it is conceivable that his jaw would have healed in time for him to be available for a fight in August of 2018 when he was scheduled to fight Alexander Gustafsson. So it is possible that this was the time at which he had broken his jaw. However, as Dana White said, this was the second time he had broken his jaw. And if you look at the slow-mo replay, you can actually see the moment when his jaw shifts to the side before sliding back into place as he falls to the ground. And when we see the doctor examine him after he has regained consciousness, we can see that one of the first things that the doctor is doing is checking inside his mouth to check whether his gum has been lacerated by the jaw fragment and whether the jaw has reduced itself. As he has broken the jaw twice now, there is an increased likelihood that he will break it again in the future. Like, I'm talking about jaw fractures that will probably get worse every time he has one. So there's that. And finally, there's issue number 3, the recurrent staph infection of his left lower leg. Now, this is an injury that has plagued Luke Rockhold for several years, and it has been an ongoing struggle for him. And it turns out it wasn't just staph infection, it was quite a bit more than staph infection, because like staph infection doesn't usually require skin grafting. So at some point in the past, Luke Rockhold, who likes to kick a lot with his left leg, apparently kicked somebody, and I'm not sure whether this was in sparring or whether this was actually in a match, but he kicked somebody with his left leg. And unfortunately, his opponent checked the kick with their shin. So if you know anything about checking kicks, you know that you typically are going to check the kick with the upper part of your lower leg. Basically, you have a bone smacking against a bone with only a thin little layer of skin in between. So you can imagine if you take two hard bones and smack them together with only a thin layer of skin in between, that just maybe the skin might not survive. In this particular occasion, when his opponent checked the kick, he suffered a laceration on his shin. Now, obviously, as a mixed martial artist, I can't really take a lot of time off while I'm waiting for this skin to heal. You know, I gotta keep fighting and sweating and rolling around on dirty mats with other sweating fighters.
Yeah, I got it.
And you can see that it might kind of get infected. So this is where the Staph aureus infection comes in. What is Staph aureus anyway, and why does it cause infections? It's a bacteria that's on your skin. It's on everybody's freaking skin. But Staph aureus is a bacteria that is supposed to be on the outside of your body, not on the inside of your body. And unfortunately, when you have a cut or an abrasion or some kind of other opening to the inside of your body, the Staph aureus, which is supposed to be on the outside of your body, can then get on the inside of your body. And that's when the shit hits the fan.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah.
So at some point, Luke's laceration became infected. Because this laceration was on the front of his shin, where the blood supply is poor, that then caused a bigger problem. In order to fight infection, you need a robust and adequate blood supply to that area so that you can bring lots of antibodies and bacterial fighting compounds to that area. Now you have an area which heals poorly and heals slowly, and it has become colonized with an infected bacteria. The bacteria is going to proliferate or grow in quantity, and it's going to be really difficult to get rid of the bacteria in that area. So all of those times that Luke Rockhold pulled out of his fights because of undisclosed injury, it's most likely that he was still suffering the effects of the open wound on his leg. And although his physicians had made several attempts to close this wound, it was proving very difficult to obtain closure in a sustainable fashion that would allow him to continue in MMA. And we know that they're having difficulty with this wound because they went to extraordinary measures to obtain closure. So in this clip, you can see that they have actually implanted a device on the front of his leg to try to pull the two edges of skin together so that they can gain closure. So that was actually one of the first attempts. Subsequently, they ditched this method and they actually just went to a skin graft. In UFC 239, you can see that Luke was wearing a protective covering over his shin to protect the skin graft. Now, if you know anything about skin grafts, you know that skin grafts are actually pretty freaking delicate. And we normally try to protect skin grafts from incidental contact and getting bumped or scraped. We don't usually send people with skin grafts out to kick people with the part of the body over which we've covered it with the skin graft. So the Coles Notes version is that the skin over top of his shin is actually pretty crappy. And they've covered it over with a skin graft, which is just skin from somewhere else in his body. And it's not something that you want to keep smashing into people because the skin graft is pretty delicate. And if you do that, the skin graft might die and then he'll have a big hole in front of his leg, exposing his bone, and then he might get infection of his bone, and that would be bad. I read an article where Luke Rockhold was quite upset that his doctors had actually undergone a skin graft over the front of his leg. But to be honest, like, what else are they gonna do? He's got a area of skin over the front of his tibia, which is unlikely to heal because of his occupation and him repeatedly smashing that area into people's bodies. So you have to cover it with something, and unfortunately, he doesn't have a lot of tissue there, and there's not really great blood supply to that area. So yeah, that really sucks. And this is something that I've actually seen in my own practice with patients who've had very bad open fractures of the tibia. The skin that heals over top of these fractures often has a significant proportion of scar tissue, and it becomes very thin and very friable, meaning that it falls apart really freaking easy. I can understand why Luke was frustrated, but this is a difficult problem to treat. I'm not sure that there was any other better solution. So, as much as I like Luke Rockhold, when I consider the medical implications of what has happened in the past and most recently this weekend, as much as it pains me to say this, I might have to agree with Dana White.
He's been a great fighter. I'd like to see him hang it up.
So that's my 2 cents, but let me know in the comment section down below whether you agree and whether you think that Luke Rockhold should retire. And as always, that's been a word from Dr. Chris, not your everyday ortho.
Just a flesh wound.